Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. Before we kick off this week's episode, just a quick ask. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to make sure that you never miss an episode, never miss out on any of the strategies and tactics that we're sharing to help you continue charting your own path to freedom. And if you'd like to go deeper with any of this, we've launched a free Facebook group, which you can join at pathtofreedom.com/group. And we've linked that in the show notes to make it easy for you to find. All right. Thank you again for being here. Let's drop in to the episode. All right. We're live. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the Path to Freedom podcast. Today, I'm joined by Scott Frith. Scott is the chairman and CEO of Happinest Brands and Lawn Doctor. This guy's been around franchising for a very long time, and I can only imagine some of the stories that he could share, and hopefully we'll get into a little bit of that today. But really excited to have you on the show today, Scott. And I know I'm going to learn a lot, and I know the audience will as well. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Wes. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, likewise. So Happinest Brands, we're going to post a link in the show notes for anyone that missed it. But a month or so ago, we published an episode with Eric Martin, who's your Chief Development Officer for Happinest Brands. So he gave us a really good overview of Happinest, the platform that you guys are have built, are building, the brands that currently fall under the Happinest umbrella. But I'd love for you to, maybe quickly just kind of give us an overview of Happinest, and in particularly, how Happinest really kind of came out of Lawn Doctor, because that's where your roots are, is with the Lawn Doctor franchise brand, which is a brand that's been around for quite a long time at this point. So I think it'd be great to have you share a little bit of that background and how Happinest came to be.
Yeah, happy to. So I'll go all the way back to the beginning of Lawn Doctor really quick, and then I'll roll in.
I'd love that.
Happinest,
yeah, I'd love
and we can kind of springboard off of that. So Lawn Doctor was founded in 1967. Two friends, they got together. One of them had a little hardware store just down the road from where I sit, Harris Hardware on Main Street. And people, much like my family, moving out from the city to the burbs, they had lawns. They wanted to take care of them. They were coming in, buying products, didn't really know how to take care of their property. And so that spawned Lawn Doctor. They got together, talked about forming the company, doing it for customers with a patented piece of equipment that they designed. And that was nearly 60 years ago. Like I said, just down the road from where I sit. So pretty amazing roots there. I joined the company when I was 13 years old, working in our manufacturing plant. My father, his story, it's pretty interesting. So he was working for another franchise organization. We had moved into that home, little tract home in a suburb. And Lawn Doctor came through the neighborhood hanging door hangers. And my father, being a city guy, no idea how to take care of the lawn. He calls Lawn Doctor, becomes friends with that franchisee. That gentleman introduces him to Tony, who was one of the founders. And ultimately, he is hired to sell franchises and was with the company for 35 years. And so, that's how my dad comes in. I came in, as I said, when I was 13 years old, just, wanted to make a little bit of money and learn the business type of thing. And then right out of college, I joined the marketing team as an entry-level marketing assistant. And I've been with the company for almost 30 years. So between my dad and I, when we sit at the table and, have a beer together, we talk about, nearly 65 years that we put into this organization. And it has been the absolute joy of my life. I just can't imagine, certainly other than my family, any other place that I want to be, so that's kind of, just quickly some of the background of Lawn Doctor. And, Happinest, as my dad exited in 2011, he retired. I stepped into the role of chairman CEO and was really kind of looking at what's next. Where are we going to go and continue to take Lawn Doctor into the future? And I just saw some trends. You saw, I like to say, home service was an ugly duckling. Like nobody was really talking about home service back then. Now it's like now it's like belle of the ball. I think there's just a lot of interest in home service because
There's a lot more, but I still think, I mean, just from what I see with all the conversations I have with people that are interested in business ownership, I mean, so many people look at you like you're crazy if you bring up something in home service, unless you really kind of laid the groundwork. But I will say, like, there's been a movement for sure, where more and more people are realizing the potential, that these home service businesses have. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think once you understand the macro demographic trends, you understand the unit economics, the
Yep.
scalability, those sorts of things, it starts to become a lot more attractive. So,
Totally.
that's kind of where I cut my teeth. And then, starting to look at home service and what was going on there, some of those trends, I just felt like we'd gotten the organization to a place where we could be something bigger, and
Yeah.
just had a bigger vision for the organization to get into other verticals, to partner. I know you've had some of the folks on your program who we partnered with and
Yep.
just build super authentic relationships with great people in really good home service brands, and help them at an inflection point where, like, it's hard to become an iconic national brand, right? I mean, that you've been around this space on all sides of it.
Yep.
And so to be able to kind of partner with someone who has sort of all the right stuff and just really maybe needs capital, needs some infrastructure, needs some professional support from a team, and just, see them take off and do it the right way. And it kind of started informally and then became, a big part of our core strategy.
Yeah. The way that, an organization like Happiness, I mean, stemming out of Lawn Doctor's 60+ year brand, I mean, look at everything you've learned as a company in those 60 years. I'm going to go out on a limb and say there was, a few mistakes made along the way that you've learned from, right? And then you take like a Sparkle Squad, right? I had, Chris Stonis on not too long ago, and great concept, but especially in the US, he's just getting started franchising his business. I mean, you can decrease that learning curve for him and his franchisees in such a massive way. And that's not even talking about infrastructure, technology, and capital that are going to help propel that growth as well. And so it's this really interesting scenario where you get everything that someone would typically be attracted to in a more emerging brand, but you're able to diminish that risk that also is there in most cases with emerging brands that are just getting started.
Absolutely. I mean, Chris was unique. I mean, I call we're like brothers, right?
Yeah. He's an awesome dude.
Tight, and he's just such an incredible, authentic guy, great leader. His background and his story, anyone who hasn't listened to that pod, please do, because it's he's such a humble person who started with a bucket and a squeegee and wanted to build something,
literally,
and then wanted to extend that and create opportunity for other people. And he's just super passionate about that. And us meeting through a mutual friend, it's kind of interesting. We knew we wanted to be in that space, and we earmarked that as kind of our highest priority to be in next.
Really?
And then we met, and just the magic happened. Like, we knew he had the right culture. He was the right leader. He had put, over a decade into that business and really knew what he was doing inside and out. He had innovated with some really cool technology, and that's exactly where we wanted to be. And it's just, it's really been putting fuel on the fire, and doing it honestly in a very controlled, responsible way, where, we're adding empire builder franchisees who want to build a big business, who understand that it takes a lot of hard work to get these things off the ground and get to scale. And we set the right expectations, but that's going to be an absolute winner in the portfolio along with all the others.
So you're telling me that buying a franchise is not a passive investment, and there's actually some work and effort that needs to go into it.
We lean into that so hard. I think that from some of your experiences with us. We really talk very openly and set the right expectations with candidates that
you should.
You have a model. You absolutely have a path to success here. it's going to be really hard work, and particularly in those early days where you're getting those first customers and you're getting to scale and you're figuring out the model. And then the accretion and the value creation happens on the back end of the cycle, right?
That's
So
right.
you've got to be willing to do the hard work up front to get to that point. And that's not right for everyone. And we don't want to bring in the wrong person. And on the other side of things, they're really unhappy with us, right? Like that doesn't help them. It doesn't help us.
Exactly. It's so much better for everyone if the expectations are clearly set up front, and it's not going to be a fit for everyone, but let's figure that out before agreements are signed and, funds are wired and someone's, 6 months into it and you're like, okay, this is not going to work. A mentor of mine, the founder and CEO of the first franchisor I worked for, at the beginning of every discovery day, he'd spend 10 minutes or so giving this analogy, and it's just always stuck with me. And he'd call it the bicycle analogy, where, it's the franchisor's job to build the bicycle, right? And build the best bike they can, and, make sure it's built out of great materials and that it's built to last. And, it's got all the bells and whistles that a good bike should have. It's the franchisee's job to, first of all, make sure they're getting the right type of bike for them and what they want to do, right? You could get a racing bike, you can get a mountain bike, you get a beach cruiser, like tons of different types of bikes. Not everyone wants to use a bike in the same capacity. So like, first get that right. And then, make sure you're buying the best bike that you can. But it doesn't matter how good that bike is if you don't get on it and pedal it. And he's like, if you get on the right bike and pedal your ass off, it's going to go far, it's going to go fast. And you're probably going to do a lot of winning, but you got to pedal the bike. And like, you could see like the light bulb kind of click with people, when he laid out that analogy, because, I think most people are going to hear you when you say like, hey, you're buying a business, you got to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But because he would extend that whole analogy and talk about how you're going to have varying performance levels amongst franchisees in any system, and kind of compare it back to those that are like training to ride their bike versus those that are just kind of riding their bike on the weekends or every now and then when it's convenient. Like, he had a whole kind of spiel with it, but it clicked with people, it resonated, and it probably weeded some people out too.
And I think it's a great analogy, and it's true through the entire franchise life cycle, right? Like, the training wheels come off, right? And then you're in year 10 and you have to continue to deliver value to that rider 10, 20, 30 years into a franchise relationship. So that analogy continues to hold true. We're fortunate. We've got 30, 40-year franchisees in our model, second generation operators. And
I was going to ask how much of that you have with Lawn Doctor.
It's incredible. I mean, I'm really proud of the culture, the depth of franchise relationships. And in particular, you start to see the sons and daughters take over. We have one franchisee. He's our largest franchisee in the system. The son has now taken over. I remember when the father started and pulled out of training with a van and some boxes, and it was a very different model back then.
Sure,
and now, I visited last year, I went to his facility, and he's got this amazing facility and this incredible fleet, and is really kind of our flagship location. And to see what he's built and how his family, was able to provide, now he's able to provide for many, many other families.
Yeah.
And that story unfolds, across the country. I've told this story a couple times before. At our last conference, my dad actually came for a day and saw the kickoff and, met some of the old guard and got an opportunity to see sort of where we were headed and the strategy and that kind of thing. And, he kind of exited. There was a bit of a crowd around him, as you would imagine. And one of the franchisees on the closing night, he's also one of our largest. And he bought from one of our first franchisees. He was a technician operating equipment on a day-to-day basis. So now his life has completely changed.
Yep.
It's really cool. It's a sidebar, but he built a home for he and his wife. both of his sons are in the business, and they have beautiful homes on either side. And so just a very close family. They all work together in the business. And he stopped me at the end of the conference and he said, Scott, I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to talk to your father. He's like, I just wanted to thank him. He has completely changed our lives, and now our kids' lives are changing. And like, you can't help but like get this feeling, this chill of like,
oh yeah,
that story. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's so cool that, the brand's been around long enough to where you've got owners that have been in it since almost the very beginning, and now they're bringing their kids into it. And I always love hearing stories where, an employee of a franchisee ends up, buying the business and taking it over. But it's incredible how much it can change, not just one person's life, but a family's life. And then, the lives of all of those that work for them. I mean, at such a smaller level, but when my wife and I got into our first franchise business, our first daughter was about a year old. She's 7.5 now. She used to tell people her last name was Shelf Genie, and I think she really believed that for a while because she was, always with us as we were, really getting that business up and running. But it's like, now we've got 3 kids and just a totally different lifestyle than we would have had, had we just kept working for other people. And we've got awesome people that work with us. And, like, I don't think my wife and I even really knew this or were looking for this when we got into business for ourselves in the first place. But by far, one of the things we're most proud of and that we've gotten the most gratification out of is providing good jobs for good people that are willing to work hard. And like, just to kind of hammer home your point, we have an installer that's been with us for probably 5 years or a little bit more now. His wife, helps him out, does kind of his scheduling and computer and administrative type stuff. And a few years ago, we do like a Christmas get together every year for our team. And she pulled my wife aside and she was kind of tearing up. She said, I just want to thank you. This is the first Christmas that we haven't had to like max out our credit cards to do a great Christmas for our family and stuff. And
those moments.
Yeah, and it's like, look, we do well financially, far better than we would have done, had we kept working for other people. Like we like having the, control of our time and more flexibility in our schedules and all of those things. I think a lot of the things that drive people to, really explore business ownership in the first place. But for us, at least, I don't think we were looking for, the gratification that we've gotten or expecting that type of gratification. And it's ended up being, by far the coolest part of it all.
That's amazing. And I love those stories, right? Those moments,
Yeah.
You'll never forget that in your whole
Never.
career. For me, as I go through my journey, I got really clear on my why, right? Like, why are you doing this every day? Obviously building a platform from a singular brand that started out of a hardware store, that's hard work, right? And so you have to keep kind of focused on your why. And it's lifting people up, providing opportunity for people to do better and change their lives. And that's true of the corporate team here. The kind of story that you just shared resonates with me. People who have bought a vacation home, put their kids through college, some little things along the way that you see them improving their lifestyles and learning and developing and becoming, different people in their career is amazing. And then to see that propagate across our franchise system, it's this leverage point that you really can't get anywhere else in any other kind of business model to really provide this opportunity. Again, the bike, right? Like we can't pedal it, we're not going to be able to get on for you. But we're going to provide you with a really good bike and you can win the race with us. We know that after 6 decades, right? And so it really means a lot to hear those kind of stories and, they resonate for sure.
Well, and I'm sure there's countless of those stories, from Lawn Doctor over the years. And, now as you build this portfolio of other brands, there's only going to continue to be more of it. I want to. I really would love to get some of your thoughts around not just how Lawn Doctor has changed and evolved over the years, but like how you guys have managed to stay a market leader, right? I mean, there's other big national well-known brands in the lawn care space, some franchise, some not. But it's just, especially these days, it seems like companies come and go, and there's always the next new brand that's generating new buzz, and you just don't see, especially in franchising outside of food, you don't see a lot of these legacy brands that have not only been around forever, but they're still growing and they're still thriving. So how has it changed and evolved, and what have you guys done to stay ahead of the curve and not become irrelevant?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's going to sound a little textbook, but it's absolutely true. It starts with culture, right?
Yeah.
One of our core values is pioneering. So, we're always going to innovate. And, we say Netflix, not Blockbuster, right? You see what happens when you don't kind of evolve and do the things that are necessary. Like if you don't make incremental improvements happen every day, you lift your head up after a number of years and you've been left behind. The market's changed around you, right? So, just embedding that in our culture, one of our core values. We recruit to that. There's a screening process for that. Every employee, we talk about it with our franchise candidates and our franchisees, that we will strategically innovate. Like I say, we're not going to chase rabbits, right? Like that's not innovation, right? Like let's chase after this and then this other thing. And then it's like, you chase three, you get none, right? But if you really understand where you can add value to the model, to the relationship, and you focus on that. So, you kind of start with culture, that rolls into core values, then that rolls into people and how you recruit against that, that kind of framing and that filter. Our team here, like everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to innovate and get better every day. In some environments, that's scary, right? It's like change management, that's a buzzword and it's a negative thing. Here, it's like, what are we doing? How are we getting better? And if anything, we have to sort of throttle back a little bit because, quite frankly, change is disruptive to the franchisee who's running a unit level business. To your point, they're pedaling that bike, and then we're throwing something in the spokes like that, changing something up that they have to implement. So we include franchisees in that journey. We have several different committees that focus on different aspects of the business model. We get direct feedback from them, and then we roll things. We're not perfect. Like, don't get me wrong. We're very real.
Sure.
We make mistakes. You alluded to that. We've made more than, we'd like to count, but we're really trying to do it in a thoughtful way with franchisees. And then that's where traction happens, right? That's where you get execution. And then one win creates another, and everybody kind of benefits in that process. And I can, certainly we can riff on some different things that we've changed and innovated, across the platform and specific to Lawn Doctor. But that's where it sort of starts.
We'll get right back to the episode in just a minute. But if you've been considering business ownership, if you're already a business owner looking to expand and you're curious about franchising, I'd love to connect with you, answer any initial questions that you have, talk about a specific franchise, and detail the exact process that I use and have taken hundreds of people through to help them understand franchise ownership, find the right franchise for them, and conduct the necessary due diligence. Click the link in the show notes if you'd like to schedule a free, no obligation strategy call. I look forward to talking with you. And now back to the episode. Yeah. So I would love to get a couple of examples, maybe some of the biggest innovations you feel you've made over the years. Before we go there, even because we own franchises. I've worked for franchisors, and to your point, like change is hard for pretty much every franchisee. Most franchisees don't like change, at least until they can see it working for other people that kind of implement the change before they do. So I guess a two-part question. First, has the type of franchise owner that you're looking for changed drastically over the years? which I think is a pretty common thing, for franchisors as they
For
grow
sure.
and evolve and mature. You learn better and better, who your ideal franchisee is. And then secondly, like, how have you encouraged or motivated your franchisees to embrace change and to not get too settled in their ways? Because for whatever reason, that seems to be a big challenge for most franchisors. They a lot of brands end up with kind of these legacy franchisees, and then they have like franchisees running like the 2.0 version of the business model. And you see a pretty stark difference in performance levels.
Yeah, exactly. Great questions. So the first one, the type of Z, absolutely. The franchisee has evolved quite a bit. It used to be, and I think this is kind of true for progressive franchise systems in the home service space. You used to buy a job, right? It's like, hey, here's what I want to make. I want to replace my income. I'm going to work very much in the business. And I'll add people as I scale, generally funding growth, cash flow from operations, type of model. And you see the growth curve and the outcomes kind of reflect that. And then you get to a point where you have a mature system, where you have large franchisees running sophisticated businesses, making a lot of money, creating a lot of enterprise value. And that starts to attract, along with the innovation you're driving through the brand, a different person who looks at, let's say, a multi-million-dollar enterprise, and they're thinking about it very differently from the beginning, right? And so it's a natural maturation process. It's the investment in the brand and kind of bringing the right people in. And I would say we have very much gone from, over decades, really, from buy a job to empire builder. I want a multi-million-dollar enterprise. That's my focus. Again, I understand it's going to take work to get there. It's not going to happen overnight, but I see a path to creating real value, not just an income stream, right? So that has definitely evolved. I think in terms of, to be very transparent, which I always will be, there are, when you've been around for almost 60 years, there's absolutely going to be people who get to a certain point where they're making a tremendous amount of money in the model. They've bought a certain lifestyle. They put an infrastructure in place. They may have a general manager running things. And you look at that organizational pyramid, they've kind of moved themselves largely out of the business. And they don't necessarily have the same impetus and desire to change because they're doing great.
They're
year after year, they have this.
Want.
That was their goal. They wanted to move themselves out of each one of these positions on the org chart. Now they're kind of at the top or out. And, I can't fault franchisees for that. It's actually a sense of pride, and I'll also say that, it's like if you set this target and you got there and then some, and you're living the lifestyle, which is, of course, a big piece of franchising of what everyone's kind of striving for.
Totally.
I'm happy for you. Now, I will say, as the system grows and people age in the system, just, as things progress, then you see new franchisees coming in, a neighboring franchisee buying that location, or, someone new to the system buying it, and they have a very different perspective on what they want to build. And then you see an acceleration of the innovation at a unit level. They start implementing the technology. They start, rolling out the new marketing programs and those sorts of things. And the exiting franchisee wins in that scenario. The new franchisee wins. We win. That's what we all want.
Yeah. Any plateaus because the franchisee's gotten to a point where they're perfectly happy with what they're making. They're happy with the lifestyle and they value the lifestyle more than, continuing to grow the business. I think that is a good thing. And any franchisor, should be happy that they have franchisees getting to that point. But that plateau will be temporary because at some point they will sell and whoever's buying it's going to be looking to grow it. And, if a franchisee's gotten the business to that point, like they're probably going to be able to sell at a very attractive price for themselves because that's the type of business people want to buy, is the one that's not, revolving entirely around the owner, that now once the owner's gone, you've got to step in and, replicate all of the production that they've been doing themselves. So Yeah, it's cool to look at it over like that long of a timeline, um, to see kind of that natural growth and maturity, and how the sophistication of owners has just kind of naturally evolved over time. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah, it's been fun to see. It's super rewarding seeing these franchisees hit these targets and achieve what they want. I think the other thing that's kind of interesting is what we thought that threshold was.
Yeah,
There's another high water mark that's much higher, right?
I
And so,
bet.
jump back to what I was saying before. You take franchisee inclusion through committees and those kind of structures. Well, now they are part of that process, right?
Hmm.
They have a level of success, and now others start to really lean into that and want to do the same thing. And what we thought good looked like, quite frankly, there's that whole next level of good. And quite honestly, I mean, this is good franchising in my view. Some of the very largest franchisees have really shaped my thinking and changed some things at a unit level that are coming back to us. And we find it really interesting. And now we start looking at that. And,
Yeah.
it's kind of this two-way. It's not just top down, we're in an ivory tower. It's, again, be strategic about the things you pull out of a unit level and you put focus in, but always be receptive and listening, particularly when franchisees are achieving the next level of success.
Yeah, I mean, I can like both of the franchises I worked for, and particularly the one that we've owned. Things that franchisees tried and innovated in their local markets are now staples in the business.
Mhm.
And like one of the examples I'm thinking of, the average franchisee probably brings in, $500,000 in additional revenue because they added this one, or made this one kind of simple tweak that, one franchisee did it and people thought he was crazy at first. And you hear stories like, you know, Jimmy John's delivery, expectations was innovated by a franchisee. The $5 footlong was,
Right.
an idea that a franchisee came up with for Subway. I mean, so I think, yeah, it is good franchising to listen to your franchisees, and you can't fully embrace every idea that every franchisee brings to the table. But if you see that something's working and it could benefit the rest of the system, you'd be crazy not to embrace some of that. How
Exactly.
has the Go ahead.
No, I was going to say exactly. I like this phrase, like hungry and humble, like really
Mhm.
want to
Yeah,
always improve and be humble about you absolutely don't have all the answers and you shouldn't, right? When you have great people around you, great franchisees, you're not going to have all the answers. You want to listen to what they're saying and then incorporate it
yeah,
into the model, as it makes sense.
yeah. And if you're a franchisee out there listening, or considering being a franchisee, like, learn the basics of the business before you start
Yeah,
coming with a
that's right.
bunch of recommendations too, right? Like, your first day out of training is probably not the best timing to try to, revolutionize the system with, a new idea of some sort. But once you
Very
know the
smart
business
guidance.
and are established, then maybe you'll have some ideas. How is the how's the service offering changed over the years? If it's changed at all, because, like, I mean, one thing that's kind of impressive to me is, like, you guys with Lawn Doctor, you seem to kind of stay in your lane, right? Like, you
Mhm.
haven't gone too broad with the menu of services that you offer. Like, you know what you do really well. You do that. I think it's a big temptation for a lot of franchises, or just companies in general, to try to kind of be everything to everyone, and start stacking all of these different services. Um, what's your thought on that? And what does that look like for Lawn Doctor over the years?
It's a great question. I feel like there's a sweet spot, right? Like if you're too
Yeah,
narrow and
sure.
too focused, you don't have the aperture open wide enough to, again, kind
You
of
could
be
be
humble and
missing
you see
opportunity.
what you're
Yeah,
missing, right? And
yeah.
so, you want to make sure the eyes wide open, the aperture's open, and you're looking at everything, taking that in, and then sort of filtering it, what fits, what doesn't. I will say probably the biggest leap that we've made in terms of broadening for Lawn Doctor is holiday lighting. And that goes back to listening to franchisees, right? So,
Yeah.
hey, I'm in a seasonal market, I'm winding down. Certainly a number of franchisees, as you well know, they like to take a long vacation,
Yep.
recharge around the holidays. There's nothing wrong
Yep.
with that. The model provides for, very good income and enterprise value, or we wouldn't be doing what we're doing for nearly 60 years and multi-generation operators taking over to the next level. That said, there's in some markets there's an opportunity in a short window of time. And so again, listening to franchisees, seeing what some folks were starting to experiment with, that led us down a path of, let's really professionalize this. And we kind of see this space evolving. I'm sure from your seat you see it as well. It's
Yeah.
this
Oh yeah.
really fragmented, like a lot of other home services kind of
Yep.
offering, and now you're seeing this professional kind of branding and
Yep.
model, come into the marketplace.
And the
And
demand's growing too.
yeah, people like you think
Is
about it fits the macro trends, but then you think about it like the holidays come every year. People want to have a good time. Everybody wants to keep up with the Joneses in a lot of
and raise
neighborhoods.
the
It's like a
bar every
competition.
year. And
Yeah,
you got to raise
exactly.
the
It's
bar
like,
every year.
yeah,
What
let
you
me
do
add
last
that.
year is
Yeah,
not
yeah,
going to be
let me,
good enough this year. You got to keep up in the ante.
yeah. So
Yeah, it's a
you
great,
know the
it's
game.
a
Yeah,
great
it's like
business to be
add a
in.
wreath, add a tree. We've got to
Yeah.
be, bigger and
I mean,
better
I'm
type of
seeing
things.
people like hire companies for Halloween, right?
Yeah,
It's not just Christmas; it's Halloween
yeah,
too, because it's definitely a keeping up with the Joneses thing, but kind of in a fun way where you see a lot
yeah.
of neighborhoods like really get into it, and once you
One,
start seeing a few of the
right.
neighbors bring a professional out, now your ladder and box of lights is not looking like it's gonna get the deal
Exactly.
done anymore.
Yeah.
You got to call in the pros too.
Yeah,
It's a cool business.
you see that the season expanding, the opportunity expanding. We're looking at some of those things, and then testing again with franchisees for multiple years before we rolled it out. One
Yeah.
of the consistent comments that we got, which I thought was really cool, was our employees love it, love
Mhm.
providing this service because
Yeah.
it's immediate excitement. It's like,
Yeah.
come outside, look at what we did,
Yeah.
grabbing the kids, grabbing the spouse, and you light it
There's
up
like the big
and they're excited.
reveal
There's a
when you're
reveal,
done.
there's an
Yeah.
immediate gratification where some
Yeah.
services may take some time. And so, it's kind of working for the franchisees economically. It's working for them seasonally. It's providing more opportunity for their employees. It's providing a
Yep.
lot of value to the consumer. And we do think it has some legs to sort of move into some other areas that will be even, more accretive for our franchisees. So that's exciting for a mature brand.
Yeah.
Lots of franchisees kind of, moving into that additional branding and model. So that's the most recent one.
Hey everyone, we'll get right back to the episode, but I wanted to quickly share a free resource with you. If you're curious about franchise ownership and want to learn more about how countless people, including myself, have leveraged franchising as a way to create more freedom for themselves and to take control of their livelihood, I've put together an ebook. It's called Franchise Wealth Creation, and it's the perfect starting point for anyone that's just curious to learn more about this whole franchise thing and how I've helped hundreds of other people navigate all the steps involved in understanding and researching franchising. So click the link in the show notes, fill out a short form. I'll send you the ebook. I think it's a great starting point if you're curious at all about learning more about franchising. All right, let's get back to the episode. I mean, what are some of the things going forward that, and I guess before we even do that, like, because you as you've mentioned, you have some very large franchisees, and I typically don't try to get into numbers on this, even if it's in the item 19. But I mean, maybe for some context, like instead of revenue numbers, like what are some of your larger franchisees? What do they look like from a fleet standpoint? Trucks, trailers, number of employees, that sort of
Um,
thing. Because I was blown away when I realized how big some of your
Yeah, so I
operators are.
think our largest franchisee, I want to make sure I'm accurate here. I believe he has over 50 vehicles on the road. So when you approach this build, it's a professional building, bought the
I bet.
land, built the building, owns that asset, grows it, very consistently year after year, grows the fleet. Uh, yeah, it's a very large business. And I would say our top, 25, 30 are really in rare air in terms of what you would see in any kind of home service model. And that's, continuing to sort of, you see people moving into that next group
Yeah.
much more quickly because you get to this inflection point
Yeah.
and now you're moving different pieces to scale from there.
Yeah.
So we're really seeing that accelerate.
So how are those franchisees scaling? Are they obviously they're getting more customers, but are they
Mhm.
doing that through broadening their market, buying more territory? Are they doing that by, penetrating the market that they're in deeper, getting into more commercial type work? Is it a combination of all of those things? Like, what does that pathway to
Yeah,
scaling typically look like?
it's a combination of things. I would say more like the same store sales are increasing more based on penetration. So you
Yeah.
just continue to go deeper in the territories you
Yeah.
have. Certainly, it's a great sign. A healthy franchisor should have franchisees coming back and buying additional territories. That is certainly a theme across our system. If the neighboring territory is available,
Yeah.
generally the franchisee wants it and wants to
Yeah.
expand geographically, but a lot of it is coming from penetration and then adding additional service lines, which you were just touching on. So, it may not be holiday lighting, which is, kind of totally new. Might be just adding more value on the property with additional service offerings that are in line with, core fertilization, weed, insect control. There's some innovative products that we have for like moisture management, reduction of water utilization, better recovery of lawns. So just some really nice service offerings that don't add a lot of cost at a unit level and add a lot of value to the customer. So it's highly
Yeah.
accretive.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really, really cool. And then with the happiness platform that you're building, you've used the term empire builders, several times throughout this conversation. You clearly have some very large, sophisticated lawn doctor owners. Are you seeing some of those folks get into the other brands that are now part of the portfolio? I assume that's the goal for the right franchisees. It's not going to be right or the right time for everyone, but are you starting to see some of that at this point?
It's really, it's not part of our thesis, if you will, that,
Okay.
you'll necessarily be lawn doctor and sparkle squad and something else. What's interesting is most franchise candidates in the process are now asking about it, right? So
Yeah.
they're coming in, it's like, I'm looking at this. Will you consider me for these other things? And the answer is, of course, right? We want
Yeah.
a relationship that becomes a big relationship, win for you, win for us. But I always say, quite frankly, I don't want to take a really good business and make it two mediocre businesses. So you have to be
Yeah.
ready.
Yeah.
You have to have the management infrastructure. You have to have the capital. We want to make sure it's the right time and that you truly understand the difference between this model and this model because the fundamental principles are the same across our models, but there are differences, right? And
Definitely.
those attributes may or may not be attractive to you. So I would expect as we continue to add brands, we're continuing to add franchisees across all of those brands. There's going to be more interest, but we just want to move really slow in that space because we want it to truly be right for the franchisee.
Well, I think that's a smart approach, and like I have this conversation with candidates that I'm working with all the time, where it's like, look, all of these businesses look simpler from the outside looking in than they actually are, and it's not that like the franchisor is trying to mislead them or set unrealistic expectations. It's kind of like having a kid, right? Like until you're in it, you don't fully appreciate all the
Yeah.
challenges that are going to have, right? You can like look at your friends with kids and be like, okay, I see that it's kind of hard, but uh it doesn't look that bad. I think I could do this, no problem. And then, but you're not there for the sleepless nights or the dirty diapers or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, you could research the same franchise for years, talk to every franchisee multiple times, but until you're in the business, you're not going to fully understand and appreciate everything that goes into it. So I think sometimes there is a little bit of maybe, just blissful ignorance or naivete with some of these candidates that are looking at, oh, you've got 4 brands under your umbrella. Yeah, probably within a couple of years have 2 or 3 of those, no problem.
Right. Yeah. And we
And you're,
undersell that, just like everything else. We kind of bring that down. It's like,
yeah,
let's
yeah,
execute really well together. Let's make sure we like each other. We're
yeah,
hitting our marks, right? And then let's have that conversation. And it resonates. Candidates really appreciate that you're not trying to oversell them. Like, okay,
that's
let's
the
get
thing.
both these deals done right now, or let's set up a development schedule where you can have that other territory. It's like, no thanks. Like, that's not
Yeah,
in your interest, and it's really probably not in ours either, right? So
no.
let's make sure that you're hitting the targets that you have, and then we'll have that conversation. If it makes sense, let's evaluate it then.
Yep. And there's definitely other organizations out there that, would tee up that 2 brand deal or that development schedule, or, oh, you want to go from, 3 to 6 territories, let's do it.
Yeah,
I
I believe that's one of the core elements of, like, how do you get to 60 years, to your point? How are we going to get to 100 years? Like, to me, and maybe some of our folks touched on this in other conversations you had, what matters in franchising is franchise relationships and unit economics, right? If franchisees really know that you care very deeply about their goals, their aspirations, their families, their outcomes, like, and the unit economics in the model work,
yeah,
great things are going to happen, right? And if you oversell, if you overpromise, it's not going to work long term, right? And you erode those relationships, and it's not good for anyone. So I'd rather, as we said, like, not do a deal with a franchise candidate because we set an expectation that was really fair,
yeah,
and not have that challenge, right? And the same thing as you expand that to any of the conversation we're having. I don't want you to branch into a territory you don't want to be in, or a brand that you don't want to be in, only to be upset. And again, we've made mistakes, right? And we've learned from those, and
sure,
we don't want to
yeah.
make them again.
That's the key, is learning from it. I've seen a lot of, in particularly service franchises, fall into the trap of selling a lot of territory to one franchisee out of the gate. Even, structuring their territories to be much larger than, other
Yeah,
service franchises, because they think, maybe that'll be a differentiator for them as
of
people are
course.
evaluating their franchise against another. And, you know, franchisee satisfaction and unit economics, for sure. And unit economics includes profitability. I think some franchisors forget that, but it's the
Yeah,
profitability that's the most important to the franchisee, right?
right,
And I think
right.
a lot of these businesses, you're going to be able to run a much more profitable business by going deep instead of wide, right? So less
I would say
territory instead of more.
I always say, if a franchisor is negotiating their franchise agreement and giving away really large territories as part of their value proposition, you really have to look at that, right? You have to evaluate that very carefully. And, like, why are they doing that? Did they not have enough value in the fundamental
Yeah.
delivery of training, support, the brand value, those sorts of things? And we see it a lot. You know,
Yeah. When I think sometimes it's learning, right? Like, Shelf Genie, when they started, the territories used to be close to twice the size what they are now. And they just learned, like, hey, we
yeah,
don't need to
need that.
have these territories this big. People are not
Yeah,
developing, to the anywhere near to the full potential of what they own. So sometimes it's learning, and then
yeah,
other times
agree.
it's they realize they don't really have any real value to add, so they're trying to make it look attractive in other
Yeah,
ways.
I
Um,
completely agree. It's funny, this home service, you're not generating revenue with windshield time, right? It's really
not
about, how do you scale
losing,
the customer base,
yeah,
right? How do you generate more revenue from each customer you have them be sticky, come back year after year? If you have a recurring or semi-recurring model, how do you make sure they're highly satisfied so they tell their neighbors? And it's like a virtuous circle. And, the land grab of having more is not really the way to profitability.
yeah. If you own this huge swath of territory, the only way you're gonna reach everyone in that territory is by paying for it, right? I
Right.
call it
A lot
feeding
of
the
money.
marketing machine, right?
Right.
And that can get very expensive, and then you got to have the sales force to cover it all,
Mhm.
right?
That's right.
Um, I mean, I was talking to someone the other day that I placed into a brand a few years ago. They started with 3 territories, if I remember correctly. They're in the Dallas area, and franchisor came to them and said, "Hey, just so you know, we've got someone interested in, these other." It was 2 or 3 territories kind of neighboring them, and they didn't have like a first right of refusal, but the franchisor was kind of just giving them a heads up, and so he called me and was asking my advice on should they buy those other territories, and they're doing well in their business. Um, and my question to him was, I think it was 3 and 3. They own 3 and they were looking at buying 3 more. And I said, do you feel like if you buy these 3 territories, you can, in a relatively quick period of time, at least double your business? And he's like, I don't think so. I don't know how we would, get enough salespeople trained up to go and do it. And I said,
Smart.
I wouldn't do it. I don't think I would do it. And I, gave him some examples of where, I'd seen that not play out so well. And, that might have cost me a commission, but
Yeah.
he's gonna probably, feel like I gave him good, unbiased advice. And, hopefully it ends up being the right decision for them. But, yeah, most
Very
of these
smart.
service businesses require, or at least the top performers do, they have a strong ground game, right? Like any good franchisor out there today is running digital marketing and has paid marketing and advertising strategies. But if you really want to run a profitable business, you can't rely entirely on that because it's too unpredictable, right? You could have a marketing channel that's worked great for you for 2 years, and now all of a sudden it's twice as expensive to generate a lead, and the leads are not as good quality. Like, you need to be running a good ground game, whatever that looks like in that business. Referral partnerships, word of mouth, customer referrals, having a strong presence in the community. And that's just hard to do effectively or to do at all if you're spread so far across, too much territory.
Absolutely right. And we do, and that's also part of the vetting process, right? Are you the right franchisee for our system? Are you willing to do the hard work? Because if you're not going to be as successful. You need to diversify. You need to have a lot of different activities to make sure that you're successful and hitting those targets. And again, I think it's okay if someone doesn't want to do that work. They're just not going to be the right fit for us. We're also, and you know this, Wes, we're kind of a 1 and 2 territory franchisor initially, right? And that we're an outlier, right? There's a lot of conversation around responsible franchising. What's the definition? What are all the elements of that? Like, we've been a responsible franchisor for almost 60 years, right? And only one piece of that is not overselling, 10 territories, right? As an example, that's one small piece, but it's just reflective of an overall philosophy of, again, happy franchisees, really good relationships, and strong unit economics. And you're going to have franchisees saying good things about the model, wanting to expand at the right time, right? They're going to want to do more business with you, and they're going to want to grow a bigger enterprise.
Hey, everyone, we'll be right back to the episode, but one quick note, success doesn't happen in a vacuum. So if you'd like to learn more, you want to go deeper and interact with like-minded people, I'd love to have you join the free Path to Freedom Facebook group. You can join by going to pathtofreedom.com/group and become a part of the Path to Freedom community. All right, back to the episode. Yeah. Well, and it's clear to me that you guys are really practicing responsible franchising. I've been laughing with some friends that are in franchising for the past couple months, and we're just kind of, keeping tallies of how often you hear the phrase responsible franchising. It's the buzzword of 2024 for sure. And but it should be that way, right? And you guys are, like with Lawn Doctor, it's kind of known. You're not doing these big multi-pack deals. And you're not adding brands to your portfolio at this crazy rate where you're making an announcement every couple months that you've, acquired another brand or brought one in. It just seems like you guys are very, very calculated about, all right, what industry do we want to go into? How do we want to break into that industry? Do we start something from the ground up? Do we go acquire something? You're moving the ball forward, but it seems like you're doing it at a very calculated pace. And that's kind of refreshing to see, because there's been a lot of companies out there just growing really, really fast. And for someone in my seat, that's usually pause to kind of, or calls to sit back and say, all right, let's see how this goes. They can sell them. Let's see if they can support them.
Yeah. I mean, you're spot on, and I appreciate you saying that about Happiness. It's been a hard-earned reputation, right? We've had to do it that way. Like what you do day in and day out, you start to build a reputation, and you hear that from a lot of people, and I'm really proud of that too, right? And we're not,
and I'm sure
perfect.
There's been,
we have mistakes. We have franchisees who do not, do as well in the model, for whatever reasons. Like that's part of franchising, but it's not going to be because we had the wrong philosophy or we had the wrong behaviors and we just kept doing irresponsible things. To me, you're going to hear more about responsible franchising. From my perspective, I feel like it's inherent and we shouldn't even need to talk about it, right? Like if you're a franchisor, you should provide a brand, good training, operational support, good unit economics where people can make money. You should really set the right expectations up front with people if you're in the long game. But it's something that we're going to hear more about. And I kind of very casually do what you do, the players in the space, and you see the commentary, and I don't wish anyone ill and I don't judge anyone, but you kind of see what's happening, and you're mindful of how things are evolving, and we'll just keep our head down, keep doing it the right way, day in and day out. And
that's all you can do, right? Is focus on the things that you can control. And this question just came to mind as you were kind of talking. I'd love your perspective, though, if you're comfortable sharing it. Like, what's your take on all the outside money that's coming into franchising? I mean, private equity's been massively interested in acquiring franchise platform companies, franchisors, even, larger multi-unit owners. And to me, that's what's driving a lot of this, maybe not so responsible franchising, is because people are seeing the paydays that some of these founders are getting for selling a bunch of units, but not always a whole lot more than that.
I think they're two different things that, maybe correlate in some ways, but they're not causal, if that makes sense. And so, Alicia Miller, she wrote a book that just came out, Big Money in Franchising. I was interviewed for that book. I'm a good bit through it, and I'm going to comment on the back end because I felt like the responsible thing to do was, read the whole thing and then comment on it. But it's really based on research that she was doing over a period of time on the evolution of capital and how it found franchising and then ramped up and sort of became what you just said. There's a lot of money chasing franchise opportunities, whether they're individual brands, platforms, they're aggregating existing opportunities into a bigger, entity type of thing. So we've gone through that process, and it has been incredibly healthy for us. It provided my father, quite frankly, with liquidity to exit the business. It gave a new opportunity for, leaders in the business moving forward. It helped us put more capital in. After 35 years, he would say this if he was sitting here, like he didn't want to go all in again, right? So there was an opportunity to kind of now put money into the business and really take it up to another level and provide for that next level of pioneering, of innovation, right? So it was very healthy for the brand, was very healthy for our team, for the, the leaders of the business who are exiting, the owners, and I think done the right way with the right players, it's a really healthy trend. A lot of people reach out to me in the franchise community who are considering a liquidity event and looking at what's happening. And I've got, that could be a totally separate pod at some point if we're interested, but you want to be really thoughtful about the partner that you bring in, right? Like, and get really clear on your goals. What do you want to accomplish in this liquidity event? what do you want it to look like post-transaction? Are you completely exiting? Are you staying in? Are you aligned on that long-term vision? Being super transparent about what you're really good at and some things that you need to get better at as a company.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if you vet the potential partners and you're really clear about where you're going and where you are and any gaps, I think you can have really good outcomes, and it can be an accelerant. And if you don't do all the things right, it can, be a little bit challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think it's like most things in life, right? Where it can be great, it can be bad. A lot of it depends on the people involved and the motivations, right?
Exactly.
I mean, look, whether it's franchising or not, good capital being injected into a good business with good growth opportunity ahead of it's never a bad thing, right? But I think there's definitely been some people out there that have seen these big liquidity events that founders have had, and now it's like a race to get to a certain number of units and a certain amount of royalty revenue or franchisor EBITDA, and the motivation is really not beyond that liquidity event for the founders, right? And so maybe that's not great in the
No,
long run
I see
for
that.
franchising,
So
but
you are absolutely, you're a student of the game. I can tell. This is our first time really spending a quality time together. So what I would say is I feel like everything finds an equilibrium point, right? Like private
it'll
equity
balance out.
is far too smart, right? So there is absolutely what you said going on. We're doing multi deals, we're running super fast, we're adding brands very quickly, and we're just not doing things in a sustainable way with the right people and infrastructure and expectations. And you see it, unfortunately, in some cases to an extreme. And then someone comes in and they get caught, quite frankly, holding that bag. Well, that certainly is going to be out in the community, and you don't make that mistake multiple times, right? And so that's going to find an equilibrium point. Things are going to slow down because there's not going to be a buyer for that. They're going to say, wait a second, you've got sold but unopened. Let's look at this list. That doesn't really work for us. You've got 10 packs. These franchisees are not necessarily going to be happy doing what you said, penetrating the market, going deep, having strong unit economics. So we're not going to have satisfied franchisees. We're not going to be able to scale this. This is going to be a turnaround. No, thank you. Right. And so that really is going to catch up along with some of the other trends that we're seeing in, just my limited, belief.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Is it will balance out or find an equilibrium over time. Maybe kind of in closing, what is, we're recording this towards the end of July 2024. What's your outlook for franchising in general going forward, and what is your longer term vision for Happinest Brands going forward?
Great questions. So I feel like the outlook is really, really strong. There's some headwinds generally, political noise, inflationary pressure, those sorts of things. We continue to grow through that. It's very healthy.
Home services in particularly tends to, weather whatever political or economic storms are
absolutely
brewing.
Totally. I've seen now 4 downturns, if you will, to varying degrees, and we've grown or kind of stabilized for a short period and continued to grow through every one of those events, to include kind of black swan events, if you will. So I think franchising overall, super healthy. What I think is going to happen is the winners are going to emerge, and this is true in anything, right? There's this evolutionary process that happens. The cream rises to the top. The best of the best always stand out. But I think relative to the trends we were talking about, responsible franchising, if you're really doing the right things, you're behaving the right way, you're going to be in this very top tier, in my belief, and you will get a disproportionate benefit from the future growth of franchising in terms of unit growth, the health of your system overall, reinvestment in the system. And I have to say, that top group, they're going to stand out. and
Yeah.
everybody's going to know who they are. So I'm actually looking for probably the biggest run of success we've ever had in our history in the coming years, just based on, doing the blocking and tackling, being very strategic, having a clear vision, doing that work every day to have the right culture, core values, team,
Yeah.
executing. We are moving to this point where you can feel the momentum right across all the brands, across everything that we're doing, and it's going to happen. So I say that very authentically. I believe that our
Yeah.
best days are ahead of us, and it's going to accelerate quite a bit for all of our franchisees and brands. Um, I think that what's happening in the short term. We're just continuing to build on that platform, and you'll see more brands, right? We're going to continue to do exactly what you said before. I don't expect that you'll turn around and see, oh, Happinest, they've doubled the number of brands. It's like
Right.
very authentic, deliberate process to bring in the right thing at the right time that we can integrate and scale off of that. And again, go back to, the why, right? Is to lift people up, to create opportunity. And if you do it the right way, more people are going to win as this platform builds out. And this is my life's work, right? Like I'm doing this
Yeah.
for my whole career. I have no intentions of doing anything else,
Yeah.
so we want to do it the right way, and and I feel like that's going to benefit us.
Yeah, that's so cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that perspective. And I'm glad it's a positive outlook. I feel, positive about it as well. And, it's strange times, but, uh, you know, the really good organizations will emerge and probably be stronger for it. I think we saw some of that during COVID. You really got to see, in particularly which franchisors did have their franchisees' best interest, as their top priority. And you saw some examples where, franchisors just kind of put their head in the sand, and it was up to franchisees to navigate, very, very odd, scary times on their own. So probably we'll see some more of that again. I agree with you on that. But Scott, thank you so much, man. I know
Yeah.
you have a lot of responsibility. You have a lot going on. You spent a ton of time with me today. So really appreciate it and thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, learning from you, you sharing your perspective. Where could people connect with you if they wanted to, maybe hear more from you?
Yeah. So you can find, Scott Frith on LinkedIn is certainly a good spot personally. And then, of course, happiness.com, our website for all our brands, and they link out to the various brands.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes to make it easy for people to find. But Scott, thank you again. Really appreciate it. And keep doing what you're doing with Happinest. I love what you've built, the way you've built it, and agree that there's a very bright future ahead for Happinest Brands.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I really enjoyed it, man.
Yeah, likewise.